I don't want to waste your time, so there won't be an intro. When it comes to improving, the first step actually happens outside the game. Because in order to improve effectively, you need to have the correct mindset, or mentality if you want. Because the way you approach improving itself obviously determines how effective your progress will be. And this video is not like the other mindset videos where people are telling you to focus on yourself versus focusing on the others, and to focus on improving instead of focusing on winning. These things are correct, obviously, but this video is kind of going into a different direction. The core idea of the improvement mindset is to look at everything in Rainbow in terms of probabilities. Now, that's not exactly a new or revolutionary concept, but I think that it's kind of the basis for effective thinking and improving. But what do I actually mean by that? I think the main implication of this concept is the idea that decisions aren't just correct or incorrect. I think every decision has a certain probability of working out. But that just pushes the problem down the road. What does working out mean? Well, what are we trying to do? We are trying to win rounds. So a decision working out means that it improves the probability of winning a round. And that's a pretty powerful construct, right? Because it applies to literally everything. Operator select, for example. The decision which operator to pick does obviously influence the probability of winning a round. And so does any decision really, even the really most tiny ones, because their consequences will ripple on throughout the round. And I've been talking about probabilities here, right? So you might expect some actual numbers, but that's not really the point here. Of course, no one really knows like the precise values of how their decisions influence the probabilities. But in a way, guessing those probabilities or being intuitively aware of them, that's kind of what skill is about, right? Think about rappelling, for example, right? Like you can either rappel upside down or you can rappel normally. And I can't give you any like precise values on what's better, but a lot of the good players know that rappelling upside down typically increases the chances of winning. And that's really all you need most of the time. But let's circle back to what this really means for improvement. I think the first conclusion of this concept is that everything matters when it comes to your win rate, right? Even when there's no apparent decision to be made, there's still some sequence of moves that maximizes your win rate, right? So be aware of what you're doing, especially when you're not doing anything at all. But the second implication is kind of the more interesting one. If you look at decisions in terms of probabilities, then you can't say that a decision was correct because it worked out. In fact, the outcome of a decision is totally irrelevant when it comes to evaluating that decision. You only evaluate decisions based on their impact on win rates before the play happens. Let's think about an example. You are a defender in a 4v2 and there are like 15 seconds left. Now you peek and you get a kill. Was that decision correct? I mean, you got the kill after all, right? But the answer is probably no. And we get that by looking at the probabilities. In this kind of situation with a 4v2 and 15 seconds left, you probably get something like a 90% win rate by just doing nothing, right? And then if you peek and you're successful, you get the kill, you can probably push that probability to like 95% or something. But the thing is, if you peek and you die, you usually lose a lot more than 5%. And that means that if we do the math, it turns out that peeking is the incorrect decision. Because on average, doing nothing would have been the higher win rate play. For this example, we implicitly assumed 50-50 odds of getting the kill or dying. But usually Siege is a bit more complex than that. So let's adapt the situation a bit. We are again a defender, but now we are in the 2v4 with like a minute left. Doing nothing gives us 15%, peeking and dying decreases our chance of winning by 5%, and peeking and winning the gunfight increases our chance of winning by 10%. But peeking in that particular situation might be difficult, so the chances of success might be below 50%. But if you do the math with these particular numbers, peeking is correct as long as you have a 33% chance of winning a gunfight. And this is, by the way, the reason why you see pros going for like crazy and aggressive plays when they're in losing positions. And of course, again, no one really knows the precise values. The skill is in developing an intuitive understanding of them. Basically, these two examples show that it is possible for a decision to be incorrect even though it worked out. And of course, it doesn't just apply to peeking alone, right? It applies to every single decision possible. But what does that mean for improving? It basically means that if you die you have to ask yourself whether that decision was correct and you just got unlucky, or if that decision itself was incorrect. But just looking at the outcome of the decision doesn't really help you much, right? Like you can't just say, okay, I died, so that decision leading up to it must have been a mistake. Because if you think about it like that, you're constantly overcorrecting for your mistakes. Now, I've said a few times how you shouldn't use outcomes to evaluate decisions. But of course, outcomes aren't entirely useless, because, again, probabilities. If you make a decision once and you lose, you can't really use that to learn. But if you make a decision 20 times and you lose in 15 of them, chances are that the decision was probably incorrect. So basically, the idea is that we use outcomes to update our expectations. If you think that a particular decision has a 60% chance of winning, but after doing it 20 times, you only get a 25% win rate, then the assumption that this decision has 60% win rate is probably wrong. Now, of course, that doesn't tell you anything about the correct decision. And because this is a mindset video, most of the effects are indirect in nature. But what I can tell you is that every good player thinks like that. Maybe not consciously, but at the very least subconsciously. Because if you don't do it that way, it's actually really hard to improve. So let's recap. Core idea is that you should think about every decision in terms of probabilities. Mainly in terms of how it affects your team's probability of winning a round. And this leads you to two realizations. First one is that every single decision matters. And the second one is that just because a decision worked out doesn't mean it was correct. And I think that this concept will really help you when it comes to evaluating your own play. And honestly, I don't even see another way of how you could conceptualize Rainbow other than this one. Alright, that's it for the video. At the moment I'm pretty busy with exams, so that's the reason why there haven't been any streams lately, but I think that I'll manage to consistently upload one video per week at least. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video, I hope you learned something new, and thanks for watching.